Hi, everyone. Welcome to the State of Web Development webinar. It's April 23rd and 12 o'clock, and I hope everyone can hear me today. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to actually remove this so you can see all of us. So why are we here today? I think over the past, I want to say 2 years, we've seen a massive shift in how we are coding, how we're developing content, how we're basically doing our day to day work, especially in tech. And we've seen a massive shift on how AI is specifically transforming this space. Um, and whether it is API platforms, frameworks, components like rich text editors and Gantt charts, we've seen it across the space. And there's some reports that show the state of API report shows a 73% jump in AI-driven API traffic. The state of rich text editor report showed 62% of users who were looking for AI assistance in their components. So it's clear that the future is here and AI is here to stay. But I think this sort of topic comes with important choices for all of us around tools, ethics, strategy, and so on and so forth. So, today we've had the privilege to assemble an amazing group of panelists from across the developer ecosystem to not only think about like what's working, but in my opinion, also what's worth watching. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass it on to Mats to introduce himself and then the rest of the panelists as well to introduce themselves.
So hello everyone, and yeah, thanks to Tiny for having me first of all. So my name is Mats, based in Stockholm, Sweden. So I'm the founder of Brintum, developer by heart. So very much in love with the JavaScript TypeScript ecosystem, and looking forward to having a great chat today.
Hi, I'm Brian. I am currently based in Orlando, Florida. I run developer relations at LocalStack. We're a AWS emulator, and Snowflake too. So that's the one area of AI we do when our tool is not actually specific in any way, but we do use AI quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to chatting about it.
Awesome. Hi, Pooja. I think you're muted.
I'm on mute. All right.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pooja. I'm a senior dev rel at Postman. And, at Postman, we've done a lot of really great things, specifically in the AI space in the last year around, agents and APIs and our entire public API network. So there's a lot going on in the world of APIs and AI, and I'm excited to share everything going on in that space. So thanks for having me, Mirna. Yeah.
And if you stay until the end, Pooja does actually have a special offer for everyone, like a coupon to Postman Con or PostCon.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely stay until the end so she can share that with you.
Definitely.
Cool. Hey, everybody. I'm Chris. I lead the DevRel team at Laravel. And it's been a few months here for me at the joining Laravel. So it's been interesting because I've come in from like a JavaScript company. I went to an AI company, and now I'm here at Laravel. And I think just PHP and the Laravel ecosystem is one of the kind of holding back from the AI wave as much as possible. So it's been interesting to see the three different groups of adoption in AI. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So yeah, let's just get started. So if we think about, especially, and I talked about these statistics, this huge adoption surge, right? AI-driven traffic at 73%, 62% of people in the rich text editor survey just saying that they expect some sort of AI assistance. So my question to the panel really is, how have you seen AI actually improve productivity in your specific domain, whether it's API development, UI components, local dev environments, or frameworks? What's really changed? I'll hand it over to Chris just to get started.
Yeah. So Laravel is like a a full stack framework, but I think it really excels at building out backends for you, building out your migrations, your database, your models, controllers, and that whole orchestration of how the backend works. And the cool thing about it is that Laravel's been around since 2013, so a lot of content to be trained on, for AI to train on. So it's been really nice to say, hey, I need like an API backend, and I want it to have like a user model, like teams, uh, I don't know, tweets, and it kind of just does that. So in my mind, it's really been an accelerator for building out any kind of backend thing that you need. So yeah, really fun to tinker with. That's just personal fun, I guess.
Yeah, no, very cool. Like leading into that, from like an API standpoint, how do you think the workflow has changed, Bujo?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to be honest, like I feel like AI has really impacted quite a different places in the entire API lifecycle for Postman. So I think a lot of people know Postman as, just this place to, hit API endpoints, get something back. But actually, it's an end-to-end API platform for both consumers of APIs as well as producers of APIs. So anything from, consuming APIs, finding and discovering APIs, using them in your workspace, testing them, and then to developing them, which means, creating APIs within our client, using specifications, to building entire workflows with with a tool called Postman Flows. So there's a lot of touch points where AI has played a role, specifically in boosting productivity. The testing space has really seen a big boost in productivity in terms of working with AI. We have a tool called Postbot, which actually writes all the test scripts for you, and it makes the process of what people know as bread and butter Postman. We like to call it like the burger, of what our product is the collaboration piece. That piece has really gotten enhanced by AI. And now Postman is a place where you can actually build AI agents and work with different workflows. So that's what I've seen specifically in the productivity side of things. There's a lot more places where AI has a touch point. And on the development side of things, now we can build specifications, and nobody really loves writing YAML, but AI does, so you can kind of use that for that. So that's been fun to see that evolution.
Very cool. I'm going to check out Postbot after this to check out automatic test scripts work. I'm curious, like beyond workflows, especially Bats and Brian, how do you think AI has boosted productivity in your specific domains, right? In terms of like day-to-day work.
Well, I'd echo what Pooja said in terms of, a lot of the stuff we deal with has, you have to either have Terraform scripts or CDK scripts and things like that. It's one of those areas where AI does tend to shine. I find personally, like in my own experience, AI is great at boilerplate type stuff, and where it tends to fail is when you ask it to get a bit more advanced. So like I've kind of been over the time experimenting with like how we can use it to actually develop AWS applications or any of the other kinds of serverless full stack applications I'm building using our tools. And I've kind of found that there's a way to build it more incrementally. Using AI, we can kind of say, I'm going to give you this small task to get me started. Like, okay, get me the deploy script for this. Get me now start building this Lambda and so on and so forth. It's when you get more broad that I've found that it tends to fail when you're trying to get it to say, build an entire project by giving it some larger scale, like, oh, I want to build a web app that does this and does that. And it tends to be fail in multiple ways there. Whereas if you take a more iterative approach, it can speed up the development and you can catch kind of where there's errors. Because I mean, I think we can't talk about AI without saying like it tends to be incorrect a substantial part of the time. I mean, let's say in minimum like 30% of the time, and you have to be able to catch those errors. And if you're doing iterative development, it tends to be easier to catch those errors than if you try to have it build an entire project from the start, and you'll have kind of errors spread throughout the entire thing. So I feel like it's been helpful as you learn to use it, but without learning to use it, it can often be a struggle, and especially if you're somebody just trying to learn something, having it to try to do too much will actually lead you down a bad path.
Yeah, I've firsthand experienced that. I took it upon myself to vibe code, as they say, an entire like full stack project, and I think I coded more than I vibe coded through that project. So just giving perspective, I totally agree with that. I think it's great for some of the smaller, more contextual tasks, and if you ask it to refactor an entire file or maybe even ask it to set up some endpoints, it can hallucinate from time to time. So yeah, Mats, I'm curious on as like a CEO, and like how do you direct, like I'll probably pose this question to you, from productivity, more importantly, like how do you tell your teams which tool to integrate in their workflow, right? It's clear AI boosts productivity, but how do you decide which tool is the right fit for the company and your team?
Yeah, right. So I actually don't. So I think what I do is more like a nudge, since I don't
Okay.
claim to be any type of, let's say, AI super expert, but I do very much keep a close look at, what people are posting very positively about on LinkedIn and other social channels. And then I nudge the team to go, I encourage them to check out, try this version of Cursor. This seems to be awesome, or lovable data button bolt, and just I want the team to pick whatever they feel most comfortable in, because I think there's pros and cons with every tool. I think so. We're right now experiment quite heavily with all sorts of fun tech. So it's super fun to see, and every morning you wake up, there's five more AI products to check. So it's hard to keep up.
Yes. Well, I guess let me this question then, which, while there are so many tools to pick from, I think one of the big concerns, you know, that I've had, and even within our team, but also like I've had just watching people put things into AI, whether it's like personal documents or confidential like company code that they're writing for their company, things like that. What sort of ethical and security concerns do you all see, and what kind of, and more importantly, what kind of safeguards have you considered putting into place when using AI in like dev tools or even in content creation? I don't want to be very specific to one thing, but how do you make sure it's safe and being used well? Anyone can feel free to step up on this one.
I'd say that's a really difficult question because each of the tools tends to be like every one of these tools tends to be different. And we've all heard like nightmare stories of people leaking their API keys or other sensitive data via AI. Some of them have gotten better, like tools like I know GitHub Copilot, and for instance, tends to only use the files that are open, and they don't store any of that data, as far as I understand it. So I think there's some better security in the tools, but you can't, unfortunately, if you open these things up, it's somewhat dependent on relying on user to, the person using it to use it well. And we all know, like, if you give people a tool, there's a tendency to misuse it. So I think at the very least, you just have there's a little bit of risk that you're undertaking regardless of what AI tool you're going to choose. And you're going to have to kind of set policies and things like that for your team to make it clear on what's expected. There's a certain level of like, I trust that you're an adult and you know what that you're doing and you're a professional. And we're going to make it clear what our expectations are. But then we're going to kind of leave it to you to do your job the way you see fit. And hopefully, I think there are certain places though where I'd say I kind of laid out like where I think AI is useful. If you are working in with very sensitive information, or there are very strict requirements about security of the application that you're working on, I would say outright just don't use them at all. Like the company should make a policy that should not be used in these applications. So I'm not saying like trust as a general rule, trust. There are definitely occasions where it should not be used at all because it's a risk, and that risk is too high. But I think otherwise, in kind of your typical kind of developer scenario, trusting that they're professionals and laying out some policies on usage should be enough.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, integrating AI into any developer workflows is like it brings great power, of course. You can run with AI, but there's a lot of responsibility with that, right? So with great power, there's responsibility. And, specifically like security, compliance, ethics, those things are pretty foundational on the Postman side of things in terms of, designing, deploying AI features. And so on our end, like we have quite a few different security features that really help mitigate some of the say like some of the things that you talked about, Brian, which is like API keys leaking, et cetera, et cetera. So the ethical safeguards that we consider are like, specifically even for our enterprise grade, we have some sort of zero data retention option specifically for enterprise customers. And then, we also have a tool called Postman Vaults, which is, your local basically way to store all of your sensitive data, specifically when you're hitting API keys, when you're hitting these AI protocols, when you're working within teams. And then we also have this thing called Secret Scanner. So even if you accidentally did leak any data, you would get flagged. So there's a couple of different ethical safeguards specifically on the security side of things. But I agree with you, Brian. This is a new space. Like, obviously I'm sure there's edge cases that all of us haven't even considered or haven't even managed to think about where this could go in terms of the ethics. I think that's more of a Black Mirror-y type of conversation, but that's one thing that I think it's like the plane is being built as we are flying it in terms of where AI is going, where the ethics are going with it. And actually this is a fun conversation if we want to have it, but I don't want to derail you. But, Chris, I'd actually love to get your thoughts because you've been nodding. So
Yeah. It is building the plane while you're flying it. I mean, everything moves so fast. The hype, the vibes are here, right? So it's like, let's chase them. Let's keep going. And nobody really pumps the brakes and says, wait a minute, was like, just because I could, should I have, And it is good to see. And to like Brian's point earlier of like, look, let's make sure it's compartmentalized. It does small features. It does small things. I think that's like a strong way to say, oh, it's not, leaking API keys in our main app. Like maybe you start with AI, it's writing tests or something that has a little bit lower of a security risk. I don't know. People can find a way to make that a security risk, I'm sure. But it is cool to see that there's companies coming up of like AI security, and like kind of parallel to that, just building tools on top of AI that kind of help you monitor the AI type content that you make, help you not leak sensitive data. So the one that comes to mind for me are like AI gateways that kind of help you monitor all that stuff, eval frameworks to help you see how well you're doing over time. These are things that I think I saw a study the other day, like 30% of developers are using AI. And in my mind, I'm like, it should be like 99%, I thought. But it showed up as like 30%. And of those 30%, how many are even worried about evals or security? Probably a very small subset of that, right? So yeah, it is Wild West right now, but it's exciting to see that people are thinking about it. This conversation is great to like bring awareness to it.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about ethics, right? Like, there's this whole conversation of like the energy that AI uses, right? So I think I read this article recently of like saying please and thank you to your
Yep.
ChatGPT is actually costing you, or So it's like, how? I think the bigger question is like, what is worth the, you know, what is worth 10xing your brain, with AI?
Yeah. I saw that from
Yeah.
OpenAI. They said it
Sam
like,
Altman.
yeah,
Sam Altman said
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Mhm.
was him. And I think it goes. There's if we want to get derailed on ethics, I mean, there's so many different parts of that
Hey, Mirna
conversation
asked
that
the
we could go in
question.
here,
Yeah,
right? Like, I mean, oh no, I'm with you. It is one of the things I struggle with personally. Is not just like if you think the environmental impact, but also like where these things get trained on. And I mean, it's not related to code, but that whole Studio Ghibli thing just really kind of brought it home to me. I'm not a big fan, but I am like, okay, the only way you can recreate this artist's art is by training it on their art, which you had no right to use in the first place.
Exactly.
So there is, there is a whole ethical issue, not like both on the environmental side and on the where, what it's trained on, and even to the point where companies have gone are now kind of building out tools that are basically like honeypots for AI crawlers, because AI crawlers, I think it was Wikipedia said something like, it was well over like 50% of their traffic or something now is like AI bots just scraping. I don't remember the exact statistic, but the point is like, so now I'm going to have to create honeypots for you to like basically go away from my protected content, or even just to prevent you from tearing down my servers because your crawlers are causing all kinds of like, load issues, right? Because they're greedy. And I don't mean that in like the technical sense. They go after everything. They're not like a user who has specific paths. They go after every possible path and they pull everything down. And so like the question is like, how is there an ethical, is there ethics that we have to consider around that? The way that they're taking, if you build a site, or an API, they're gonna these crawlers are indiscriminate.
Yep.
So there's just there's so many different issues around that, and I think it is important to think about it, and even from a developer standpoint, to think about it in terms of how do I want to use it? Like, what is it like? What are the ethical lines that I have in terms of AI usage?
Yeah. So we'll get to a point where we have to have AI that builds the honeypots to fight the AI that crawls, and we'll just sit back and watch at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had actually that very thing happen to our support forum. We had, I don't know, 5 or 10 different AI bots at the same time, causing really slow loading times for the actual users who we're trying to serve, which is not really a pleasant problem. So, and it definitely comes back to all the ethics. But I guess the problem is when people use it who don't really care about the ethics. Then how do we handle that? That's maybe another AI moderator layer, like a Cloudflare AI or something that makes sure that it's reasonable usage or users types of users.
Very true.
Cloudflare was one of those that released basically a tool to like it actually uses AI to auto generate a honeypot, right? Like it says, so like it redirects the crawler off to like some seemingly realistic looking content that's completely AI generated and fake. So it's the fact that we got here and that we got here so soon is problematic.
Yeah. And I
AI
think
arms race.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what I wanted to touch on, and I was going to bring up the Cloudflare. So I'm glad you brought it up, Brian. But I think I see, just as Pooja and even Brian had mentioned, we are seeing a lot of this plane being built as we're flying it. But I want to echo what Chris said, which is, I think we've seen success in maybe starting small with AI and like growing it within our own company and within my own workflow and our team's own workflow. But I completely agree. I wanted to bring up this topic because even when I sent like a pre survey to some of the attendees, who they, one of the big things that they talked about is they want to see how different people on the panel are handling ethics and what their thoughts on. So it's an important topic to our attendees, which is why I brought it up. But there's one thing that I'm going to pick Chris here because he brought it up at the start, about there being these three buckets of people using AI, and also again later in the response. And I've seen this trend where there is a group of people, at least like, um, in terms of like 10 EMC, our report says about 18% who have no plans for AI in 2025. In the State of API report, when I was reading it, 21% said they're not using AI today and don't have any plans. So there is a small subset of developers on the sidelines, right? And Chris, you mentioned Laravel is also not completely head first into AI. So I'm wondering, what do you say to this segment of developers or even creators, because we're all in DevRel space, who are like hesitant to adopt AI?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Brian said earlier. Is the thing about how people talk about AI and tools like this is like, oh, all you see are the success stories of, oh, I vibe coded an app in a weekend and I'm making 60K, right? And that narrative really leans to people leaning away from it, because myself, I try to do a giant thing. It fails because it's a giant, hairy task that even a person would fail at. Um, then you kind of say, oh, it's not good enough. So I think there's a muscle you have to build when you're working with AI of saying, let me start with the smallest possible thing. And that a couple years ago, that was autocomplete. And it was bad at the beginning. And now it's getting a lot better. And now you get like autocomplete that replaces blocks. So you just kind of like build the muscle, try something larger, see where it breaks, scale back, try something again. And I think it takes time to build that sort of knowledge. And it's a tool just like everything else. But the narrative is just so large, and like one weekend, one prompt, it leans to the adoption hurting.
Yeah, we don't hear enough about vibe debugging, which I think that's the flip side of this, which is probably weeks of pulling hair if there's any left. So it's just yeah, I think it's a bit too much on the hype side for my taste.
Yeah.
Have
And it followed Web3. So I think there's like a hype train followed by a hype train, and people are just kind of over the hype trains.
have have you seen anything outside of like the hype and the ethics preventing developers or content creators from adopting AI? Is it just sometimes is it kind of like, what is the value of me typing a prompt when I could probably make this in an extra 5 minutes, right? Like like I've been a developer for a few years. There are some functions and some things that I'm coding where I could just do it with autocomplete quicker than like type a prompt, whether it's in Cursor or Windsurf, wait for it to respond and then debug it. Like, is there like a is could that be also like a place where people are hesitating? I'm just curious. As a developer, what are your thoughts on that?
I've seen people who like have said that the AI constant prompting, even in Cursor or Copilot, never mind, like it's different than autocomplete, where it just breaks their flow, because it's kind of interrupts it. And I can totally understand that. It can really do that. It can be somewhat intrusive at times. I mean, most of the editors, there's some level of I can configure that, but I also think that, that's difficult, especially if you're like a really experienced developer. It's kind of, and you feel like that you're able to kind of code without it. Having it constantly prompting you breaks your flow, and you might just shy away from it.
Yeah, and one, the quality just is getting better and better. Like right now is probably the worst it's ever going to be moving forward, right? But a lot of people just keep hitting these problems with the models and returning bad responses. So that's understandable there. Um, and I think there's just a muscle shift for like a lot of people are high powered developers, can build anything in a weekend, right? So for them to hand off that control and move more into like the management level, where they have to watch AI, prompt it, and then kind of give feedback, it's a tough muscle to switch to when you're used to being the high powered individual contributor, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think for me, the way I look at it is, it definitely, I get help with the tedious heavy lifting, like stuff that I don't necessarily have cached in my brain, like advanced regex, complex CSS gradients, animations, transitions, stuff that some people know that by heart. That's awesome. I don't. That it takes a huge toll for me. So if I can get save some CPU cycles there in my brain, I'm all for it. So we've had really good success with decent complex animations and just CSS ruling and stuff that takes a lot of trial and error to get right. So just freeing up
Yeah.
the brain for more complex tasks, in my view.
I think it's great for those those cases where it used to be I'd go to Stack Overflow or MDN or something like, what is the syntax for this? I don't even remember.
Mhm.
Now I need this array to be sorted and filtered. Can you just and it's good for that. It's really good. It saves you time, right? Like, I mean, that search plus finding the right resource and copying that code over and editing, like, was a time. This at least does that for you.
Yeah, and
What
also refactoring is great.
what are your go-to coding tools? This is not one of my planned questions, but I'm curious now across what are like maybe your top three tools that you use in your daily workflow?
WebStorm Copilot for me.
Okay. Brian, Pooja, Chris.
I'm on Cursor for the most part. I've been forcing myself, honestly, for a while to use Cursor. I liked it because I was a VS Code user, and at least I didn't have to completely change how I work. And at the time, Copilot was much didn't do as much. It couldn't actually like change files and create files and do all that stuff. It's since changed, so but I made the transition to Cursor. Been experimenting with things like Amazon AWS has like where Amazon has a queue for the command line thing for doing command line stuff or because I don't like working on the command line. I find it tedious. Some people love it. I don't. So having tools like that can help me with some of the command line commands that I tend to completely forget
Have
are
you
great as well.
have you tried Warp
Yeah,
terminals?
yeah, or yeah.
Okay, nice. That has really redefined how I use the command line because I'm on the same page. I do not. It's not. Some people are like they do everything in Vim, and I have a huge respect for them, but that's just not me. So yeah, I'm curious, Pooja and Chris, top tools.
Yeah, I mean, so my work these days, specifically like doing developer advocacy on the Postman side of things, like most of the development type of work I do is building agents. And, I've been using this tool within Postman called Postman Flows, which is like this visual canvas of dragging and dropping APIs and connecting them and building these like end-to-end workflows essentially. And this is an interesting question when you talk about adopting AI because we have this, we call them blocks. We have this block for called Create with AI, and it's usually, it's basically ChatGPT, but you can work with other AI protocols as well. But when your API takes some sort of input, it's a very input output kind of system. Would you want an API to feed another API the input, or could you use like a create with AI, right? So Like, for example, if you wanted to input, like I just built this agent recently, it tells me what to wear based on the weather. I just asked it, like, what should I wear today? And
Cool.
um, and like I'm in LA or I'm in Boston. I made a really cute little video about it if you guys want to see. But it's interesting because I didn't use an API to feed a weather API. The data I used AI to do that. Like I asked, basically like give me the longitude, latitude for for the city, and I just the user can provide the city, like any city, like, hey, I'm in LA today, what should I wear, or hey, I'm going to Greece next week, what should I wear? And that data gets fed into an API, which gives you not only the weather, but then that can feed into another AI block that can give you an itinerary. So it gets really complex, connecting these blocks of AI together to build out like a larger sort of agent or application. And then we recently came out with this, Postman came out with actions, which is once you have this flow that you've built, you can deploy it very easily in a couple of clicks, where it gives you a API endpoint. So now you can use that endpoint in different applications. So it's interesting, we think it's like the fastest way to deploy agents applications, because it just takes a couple of blocks, very visual, like drag and drop kind of feel. So I've been playing around with that a lot, and there's a lot of cool things you can build. Like our team is like getting really creative in terms of like, what can we use this for? We can build personal assistants, we can build customer agent things, we can build, I was thinking about like a healthcare use case, something that transcribes like EMRs. I don't know, but it's now your brain has not just shifted about what you can, like how to build, but what you can build. So your mind is thinking more about use cases rather than the how, which is an interesting place to be, I think. Like, we have the tools in our fingertips. What are the use cases that are worth it, are valuable, right? So something to think about that on that end. So yeah, Chris, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I agree. Like I think this unlocks, not just for developers, but for a lot of people, um, tools like um, what you just talked about. Tools like I've been playing with N8N recently, but the limitation becomes more imagination than actual skill of coding it, right? Um, like I built an app a year and a half ago and did all these like flows and AI calls that chained into each other in code, and that took a few months to build. And then here comes N8N, and I can just drag and drop a few things and do the exact same thing and better. Really interesting. For my tools, I've been dabbling in a lot of things. I came from SourceGraph, which is an AI coding platform tool, and I use Cursor. I have gotten into this flow where Cursor is not the greatest at doing the planning for me. So I actually go and use O1 Pro on ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what I want to build. Create me a full like PRD, give me checklists, and then I'll drop that into a file in Cursor and then say, hey, Cursor, like this is my plan. Go through step by step, check off the boxes. Don't go to the next checkbox until I'm like happy with the first one. That's kind of been my flow lately. I've been messing with Devin. I messed with Devin early. Not great. It broke a lot of things. Uh, New Devin is a lot better, but there's still such limitations on what kind of tasks you can give it. And I am writing like full PRDs for it, but it does them.
So,
But yeah,
so for those of the folks in the audience who might not be aware of Devin, do you want to give them a quick recap on what Devin is? Because I think
oh,
I actually used it very early on, and I was not a fan.
yeah. What is Devin's like tagline? It's like replace your software engineer or something like that, or but yeah, it basically lives in your GitHub repo. You give it a task and it just goes to work on the GitHub repo. Like Cursor, you kind of have to be there, human in the loop. Devin just says, "Hey, I'll see you later. I'll put in the PR when it's ready." And they have this interesting workflow that Devin will actually send you a Slack message and say, "Hey, I kind of got lost here. What do you think about these two options?" And you kind of respond, and then it continues. Yeah, their goal is to kind of like be a software developer that can just crush through your PRs for you.
Wow.
And it's a lot better than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, I feel like I remember trying it early on, probably after seeing it on Blue Sky or Twitter or X, and now I am very surprised to hear that it's better because at that point I was pretty disappointed at the
Yep.
quality of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Brian in chat. Yeah. I don't want to like derail and go back to the ethical question because this is a whole can that can open up. But yeah, saying that you want to replace software engineers like livelihoods, that's a weird thing to say.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think that brings us, and I also, I don't know if we want to stay only in the ethical because I know, like our audience definitely asked a few more questions that I would like to get to, but I think just moving into a little bit more like front end, like we've talked a lot about API and the back end space, right? But there's also like this whole front end and web development space. And I think Pooja had already answered my question about how is AI being applied to the API lifecycle, but I'm very curious on the front end side of things. Do you think AI is at the point where it can replace front end components? Um, or do you think there still needs to be like a human in the loop when people are coding with it?
I don't know. I think the operators are kind of freaky. Yeah.
And that's why I asked the question, right? Like,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I have a colleague, Sterling, who just feels like UIs are going to be obsolete in like a few years, but that's like a, bigger question. But yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on the use case. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on front ends? I don't think
I
front
think
ends need
it's
to be so complicated anymore. Like
yeah.
for,
Yeah.
I think it's still terrible at Tailwind, which makes me sad. But
Yeah, I mean, I'd say my experience is it's better at front end in many cases than it is at back end stuff. Uh, Not necessarily Tailwind, but I think doing HTML and JavaScript front ends is pretty effective. But would it replace a developer? I wouldn't trust it to replace a developer. I mean, I kind of view it as AI, at least in its current form, and I have my own personal skepticism on how much further we can get this generation of AI in terms of its ability. But taking it as it is today, it's basically a forever junior developer. Like this is a developer that like it doesn't learn from its mistakes, and it doesn't. If you ask it the question again, it's more likely to make a similar or slightly different mistake if it makes a mistake. So it's not there. It only learns in as much as the context that it has of that particular conversation. Beyond that, it does not know anything. It's not a knowing thing. It is a predictive text thing. It's you have to grasp that part of it to understand where the limits of this are and why it can't replace a developer. Because I mean, if I hired a developer and and months later you're like, hey, listen, you're exactly the same skill set you were the day I hired you, I seem to have learned anything from your experience, that would not be a developer you'd keep on your team. Now, can this tool be something that will can help you do some kind of small tasks and improve your workflow? Absolutely. But can it replace a developer? Well, only if your view of developers is somebody who has no ability to learn and grow. And it basically, you're a permanent junior developer. I'm never expecting you to get to senior level.
that actually brings up I think Chris, having worked at SourceGraph, they posted this like it's a thought leadership article or like a blog that was the death of the junior
Death
developer.
of the junior developer. Yeah.
Yes, I think I remember reading that, and it was very clear, right? We're we're not there yet where we're creating senior developers or even architects with AI. It really is like you're directing, you're creating a PRD, you're asking it to check in with you. Even Devin is, sending Slack messages when it's confused, right? So yeah, I don't know if I'm personally seeing a full replacement, but I was always very curious. Matt, I know you wanted to say something, especially as someone who's working with components. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I very much, yeah, I'm all behind the Forever Junior, but I think it also comes back to what we said earlier. I mean, it's all about also, how you frame the questions. You'll be, linearly disappointed, with the size of the task you ask. So if you stay small, it might at times appear senior or mid senior. So that's at least our findings. If we refactor this small function or build this small widget, decent to actually pretty good results. But the bigger the task, the worse the results. And speaking specifically on front end, even if you get it to throw a couple of divs buttons on the page, I mean that's okay. That's step one. Now the softer topics, UX design, it's it has no go. It's not text, so it will not do well. Maybe it will in the future, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So as long as you're happy with an ugly site, then the AI will do some parts of that. But if you want the full UX to compete with the best of the best, I don't see AI adding anything on that angle.
Yeah. Yeah. UX is human, right? Like, and that's
Soft.
constantly tweaking, constantly looking at, oh, they never clicked that button or 10% did. And so much of that just maybe there's a loop where they can build that in the future and kind of feed that data back into the AI. And, maybe that happens, but there's still that creativity aspect of when you land on a website, there's just so much creativity going on that, yeah, if you're training on current designs and everything, I don't know, like it seems to pick the lower thirds of UI designs to train on. But yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I just think UI is just going to get simpler in the future. I just feel like, we have these like banking sites. Like, how many times have we been on websites that are like, where is the thing I need to find, and you
Yeah.
just want to like ask the little chatbot, like, can you just help me figure out this one little thing that is like nested in like a million places, right? So I think this is where AI really shines. You just have this like thing, it asks you, get what you want, right? I think that's the value of it. I don't think sites have to be so complex these days, right? So
Yeah. I had to go into ChatGPT and say, how do I get to do a catch-all route in my Google workspace? And it was like, go to settings. And I'm just like following what it's saying.
mhm,
And that would have been great to just have automatically.
mhm.
nice. Yeah, I mean, I think chatbots personally have used them a lot, and I've probably become a lazy user on most sites. If I see a chatbot, I first try there before even trying their own search, because
Mhm.
sometimes it can just quickly answer what I need. Even like some of the docs these days, like we at Tiny, we implemented a Docs AI bot, but I've seen it in Docker. What else? Some other sites that have used Mixpanel. Trying to think off the top of my head.
We use
Temporal. So yeah, I've seen them in various sites in the docs, and those are pretty great. Like it's great to sometimes not have to look through the docs as a lazy developer and just get the code snippet that I need or point me to the right place. So I think that's also been valuable personally.
one of the things I like about the docs ones is, for the most part, at least the ones I've seen and the one we use, it's called Kappa. But it's what I like is that it knows the limits of what it knows. It basically, if it gets a question that's like, hey, I don't find anything in my training, which it's trained on just your docs and whatever other resources you might give it, it says, I don't know the answer. Sorry. Which I think is the best, because what you don't want to do is implement a chat bot in your docs that gives people the wrong answers. So yeah, so that's what I like about it. Is it says it doesn't try and fabricate answers. It just says I don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah, and also like and that kind of brings me into this sort of um, piece of information that I've been seeing in these reports where almost there's a almost like 20 maybe 10 to 20% of people across both reports who cited that security was a big reason they choose the tools they choose, or the product they choose. And the thing about Kappa AI or any kind of like doc bot that you have on your website, um, if it's being able to filter PII information, API keys, um, off the gate, I think that's a huge value add for your customers. In fact, like I've kind of like pressure tested it where I've just put a series of API keys and I'm like, is this the right TinyMC API key or something? And then, as Brian said, it just knows where its limits are. And I think that's a kind of great example of like an ethically secure AI product, um, as well. So it not to kind of restart the ethics conversation, but just wanted to highlight that since you brought up Kappa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Cool.
can't get away from the ethics conversation.
It's
you
always
fucking can,
present.
unfortunately. It's like
Yeah.
every topic. It's like, okay,
Yes.
there's an ethical side to this.
Exactly. It's like, I can do this, but is this good to do? Like, that's
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
point, you know?
Some people don't even ask that question. I opened Twitter this morning. Somebody's like, look, I faked all of my testimonials on my homepage using AI. I'm like, oh, you're just not even trying at this point.
I know. It scares me for the youth of this. Like, that's a bigger question. I'm like, do the youth even need to read? Like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I think we
just
have
get fed all this info.
material for another four webinars
Yes.
already.
Another
Yeah.
webinar. Do we think? What is the future of thinking looking like? But
Yeah.
yes. But speaking of future, and I know we have like only 10 minutes, so I like one question that has sort of popped up in my head and in a lot of folks who are attending is, do you all see a significant do you see a future in which a significant portion of web development, whether it's bringing it down a rich text editor or bringing down some sort of component or working with the back end and or even implementing full AIs, right, or APIs, do you think a significant portion of coding and or content creation, because we're all developer relations, is going to be handled by AI? Do you think that's where the future is headed, where it's 60% of the grunt work is going to be done by AI and 40% is us managing the different agents?
I think so
Or,
for sure.
sorry, what?
Absolutely. I definitely think that that's the way it's going. Maybe not tomorrow, but it moves so fast. I can't even guess where we're going to be in a year or even less 5 years. I have no
Yeah.
clue. So
Yeah.
but it's already we can have meme generation for social media or even content generation, ideation. Or, I mean anything that's pure text. It is such a downhill experience already.
Yeah. And if I as far as DevRel and content creation and coding, if I look at my day and I break it down by minutes, most of that time is not the most enjoyable time for me, right? Like I'm doing a lot of tasks that are management tasks or that are taking a video, turning it into a blog post and kind of spreading out some tweets across different social accounts. A lot of that stuff was not my base value add, the human aspect, the informational aspect. A lot of that is kind of cutting up the same content and putting it in different places. I think there's a lot of that can be offset so that we can focus on more of the creative human to human stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a pendulum swing, right? Why do we go to country stores? Because we want human made, homegrown type of products sometimes, there's a charm to that, right? Like the handmade good, right? So it could be a pendulum swing with everything being AI-ified. You can tell what's AI-ified. I mean, it kind of has gotten scary where there's some things that you can't really tell. But I could see a future where people want to bring back the human-made elements, maybe. But I
Yeah.
also think the human will always be the holder of the puppet strings, right? Like I don't I mean, that'll be a scary world when the AI becomes the puppet string holder, But this is getting into Black Mirror. I will always go down this rabbit hole if anyone wants to continue. But I see a future, like ethically, if we're still talking about ethics, like, I do still feel like we have to tell this thing what to do, and it does a good job. But when we go down the energy side of things, it's like, what should I tell it to do that's actually worth it versus, do I need to 10x my brain in these really like menial tasks, right? So if we think there's going to be like a whole energy crisis, maybe that might be there might be a shift where there might be a little bit more of like, use AI for this and don't use AI for that, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, create a little scarcity on it.
I-
That
Yeah.
reminds me of when I first joined and got Devon. It was like 500 a month for like 25 credits, and I'm like, oh boy, 25 credits. I have to be like very specific about what I'm wasting credits on.
Mhm.
Um, that's an
Yeah, I
interesting
mean,
thought.
I would add a dose. I think to kind of follow on Pooja's point, I had a dose of skepticism. I actually don't think we're that far from the end of the current cycle of AI. I don't think the kind of current model of how these AI systems are built has much further to go.
Mhm.
I think, you could see it even in, I mean, you all probably have felt it. OpenAI's like development, like their latest models don't seem that much better than their prior models, really. And to the point where even OpenAI says, well, hey, what was going to be, our 5.0, right? GPT-5, right, is now GPT 4.5 because we're not even happy enough, but we're going to tout it anyway. Of course, it's going to be the future, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's also we're kind of starting to understand AI's limits. I think sometimes what AI does can appear creative because AI is good at creating mashups, but AI is only able to basically it's only able to create a mashup. It's not really creative. Like it can only take two things that already existed and maybe mesh them together, two or more, right? A bunch of things. It is not actually able to create something entirely new, where like a human mind will take something. It can say be influenced by what came before it, but will create something entirely new that is different from those, but maybe built on those.
Totally.
There's no way AI currently can do that. It's just not possible with this
Mhm.
generation of AI. It only knows it's as I said earlier, it's a predictive technology. It's not it's a the way the whole thing works is this, it puts a word and it says like, okay, here's what the next word should be, right? Or piece of code. It's be
Mhm.
based on a bunch of training. It's not
Mhm.
it's not able, it doesn't know anything. It's not
Mhm.
knowledgeable. It has
Mhm.
no actual skill. It's a predictive text thing. So
Yeah.
that's you've heard that I am a firm believer it can be used heavily in code to help you with your day-to-day tasks. But can it get beyond where we are now? Let's put it this way. Who's making money on AI right now? What companies are making money? Zero. Nobody's making money in AI right now. So I think we're gonna hit the limits. I've been in this industry long enough to have been through like some cycles, and I think that's where we are. I think it's gonna be part of our tools, but
Mhm.
I think we're nearing the end of this particular cycle.
Yeah. This actually gets me on this thought of like, classical art a lot, because I went to the Sistine Chapel a few years ago, and the creation of man, like that is epic because that was done before AI, right? Like Da Vinci went up there and like made that, right? I don't think AI can get there. I mean, it can get there, but it's not going to be appreciated in that way, right?
It can mimic it.
It can mimic
Yeah.
it, but it can never be done, right? And there's value, like that goes into value, right? So like, why is a Da Vinci painting valuable?
Yeah, and work that goes
Yeah.
into it is like adds to the perceived value. And if all this stuff is just dime a dozen,
Right.
people will look past it easy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to the Sistine Chapel and you get the little creation of Adam magnet or the, postcard, right? Like that's like 50 cents versus, right. So I think that's
Exactly.
going to be a whole conversation on value.
That's very, very true. I mean, I think personally, I'm also a firm believer that it's really hard to replace a full human being today, and maybe I would say, like in relation to the question itself, like for the foreseeable future, I still believe there needs to be a lot of human in the day to day work, especially like in something like developer relations. I think people can tell when a blog has been written by AI versus a human, and if they've actually kind of gone through the steps, and or if we create a video and talking to a script versus sometimes just naturally responding. I think there's a difference there, and I felt the difference when I've done it. So I think being authentic, having the human touch is definitely going to make sites stand apart, people in the roles stand apart, as well as like leaders as well. Yeah, I think we're very close to top of time, if not already there. So I'm going to quickly share these slides in our follow up email to everyone. These are all the resources that we cited over the course of this webinar. And then I'm going to actually quickly hand it over to Pooja, who, as I promised, has a special offer for everyone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we have a user conference coming up in June. So this is PostCon, and we're going to be talking. There's a lot of AI fun stuff and API things. It's in LA. So there's a 50% off code. So if you're interested, definitely register. It's always a great time. I think it's 2 days. There's some hands-on workshops. We have some great speakers. I believe Ryan Reynolds is the keynote speaker. So if you're into that, yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's a great conference in general. We're actually doing a lot with MCP, talking about MCP. That's a big shift in what we're doing. So if you're interested in building agents, working with APIs, things like that, it's a great conference to attend specifically. So the workshops are worth it, 100%. So yeah.
Awesome. We'll be sharing this email with or this slide with the recording as well. So if you signed up for this webinar, attended it, you will definitely get the 50% coupon. Feel free to use it. I think I've been to a postcon before. It's a pretty great conference. And if not for APIs, for Ryan Reynolds at least. All right. So there's some upcoming events across. I pulled this from all of our different sites. I believe if you want to meet any of the panelists over here, I believe Matt's is going to be at the Stockholm Tech Show, May 14th to 15th. We're doing a webinar again with Tiny MCE on May 21st. And I just realized we have some events in June that will be there as well at React Summit in Amsterdam. PostCon is, of course, on June 3rd to 4th in LA. And then there's Laracon US, where both Tiny will be there, and I'm sure Chris will be there, which is July 29th and 30th. So yeah, I hope everyone had a fun time. Unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour for questions, but I think this was a very great conversation. And if I may say so myself, I really value everyone's opinion on this panel today. These are I've worked with each of these people in the panel in different capacities. And let's just say it's been incredible, and they really know what they're talking about. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone for joining me and joining our wonderful panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks,
Pleasure's all
Miranda.
ours.
This is great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.